Justice Antonin Scalia once said, a good, hard-hitting dissent keeps you honest. Yet today, Scalia used the Supreme Court's ruling on Arizona's immigration law not to offer a legitimate challenge to the majority opinion, but to take political cheap shots. As one reporter for Mother Jones put it, if you put Scalia on Fox and Friends, you'd have to squint to notice the difference. Good one. In his dissent, Scalia complains about the lack of law enforcement by the feds, even though the Obama administration has cracked down on illegal immigration. Yet Scalia writes, Arizona bears the brunt of the country's illegal immigration problem. Its citizens feel themselves under siege by large numbers of illegal immigrants who invade their property, strain their social services, and even place their lives in jeopardy. Scalia also used the ruling to rail against President Obama's decision to halt deportations of thousands of young people brought here illegally as children, a policy that has nothing to do with the Arizona case. The president said at a news conference that the new program is the right thing to do in light of Congress's failure to pass the administration's proposed revision of the Immigration Act. Perhaps it is, though Arizona may not think so. As Salon.com describes it, it's a passage written by a man who obviously no longer cares that he sounds increasingly like a right-wing talk radio host rather than a justice of the Supreme Court. So it's no surprise that none other than Rush Limbaugh jumped to Scalia's defense earlier.
Scalia is so right on the money on this. It boggles the mind. All Arizona did was write law that mirrors federal law that Obama was not enforcing. And the court told them today they can't do that. It's disheartening.
Let's bring in Joan Walsh of Salon.com, syndicated radio host Michael Medved, and author and attorney Catherine Cryer. Where do I start? Whatever happened to the days of balls and strikes? Catherine Cryer, I'll ask you, is this the most opinionated we've ever seen a judge?
Well, he's always great fun because there's no question that Scalia is a very intelligent man, and he can write very, I'll say powerful. That doesn't mean they're legally appropriate, but powerful cases, powerful dissents. But when you look at his varying positions, he argues, his originalism, and then he says, all right, we're talking about state sovereignty. And, well, state sovereignty is fine when we're talking about sort of the right-wing position on immigration, but if we're talking about campaign finance reform, maybe it's federal. If we're talking about medical marijuana laws, maybe it's federal. You watch the vacillation and the legal theory changing with the ideology, and you have to go, wait a minute. There isn't a legal consistency here to support the reputation he has.
Joan Walsh, what's wrong with what Scalia said?
Well, first of all, to just jump out of the world of law and the Constitution and precedent and all the things that the Supreme Court is supposed to be our guide on, and to smack a sitting president that way, I really can't think of another example of a justice doing something that outrageous. And it's really as though he cast off his judicial robes and revealed himself today to be a partisan hack. There have been decisions before. He is the man who gave us George W. Bush. He did use the 14th Amendment, which had been passed to give rights to freed slaves. He used that to make George Bush president, and in the process, disenfranchised a lot of black people who didn't have their votes counted. So that was a special one, and said there could be no precedent. So we've got a lot of history of Scalia doing this, but this was the worst.
Michael Medved, did Scalia embarrass the court on this one?
I don't think Scalia embarrassed the court. I think what Scalia was doing to an extent was stepping, you're right, beyond a normal judicial role. But please remember, the President of the United States, when he had the justices in front of him at a State of the Union address, also went way over the line in attacking the Supreme Court in a State of the Union address. I wish the entire process could be less politicized.
Attacking? He gave an opinion. He said he was worried about the ruling. He wasn't attacking them.
He would attack the ruling. Look, the job of a president, whether he likes a ruling or not, is to say, this is the law, I will enforce it. It is not to give his opinion as a former.
But you're willing to say that Scalia went beyond.
Law.
You're willing to say that Scalia went beyond.
This is a very unusual.
That would be an activist judge.
By the way, can we please throw that word in there?
What's that?
Let's throw the word activism in there because actually it can be applied to both sides at various times, but this is
there's no
definitely
activism here because it's a dissent.
Right.
You see, and one of the problems that they had, there were 3 different dissents. There was one by Justice Thomas and one by Justice Alito and one by Justice Scalia. And it was because they couldn't agree on the basis for dissent and because this was basically a 6-3 decision, even though it was formally only 5-3, because Sotomayor was excluded. I mean, Elena Kagan was excluded. Yeah. So because she recused herself because she had been a Solicitor General involved in the case.
Joan, you buy all this?
No, I don't. I mean, I agree with you, Ed. I think that what the president said was very mild about Citizens United. I would also remind Michael that then Sam Alito mouthed, "You're wrong," insulting him at the State of the Union. So, I don't see that the president gives up his ability to criticize a Supreme Court decision. I think that Scalia really stepped beyond the boundaries of what you do in a dissent.
All right. Speaking of that speech and the response from Sam Alito, let's talk about what happened today. The Supreme Court rules on Citizens United, telling 22 states you got to play by the federal rules. You can't limit corporations' giving. Catherine Cryer, I think this is bigger than the first ruling.
Oh, I'm with you. When I heard you earlier on your program going, let's pay attention to the Montana decision. I was in Montana a couple of days ago and learned about some pretty interesting stuff about the whole 10th, 11th Amendment argument. And a lot of lawyers were pushing the Montana Attorney General to assert some arguments that weren't made. And there are certainly a lot of people at home wondering whether Montana, the governor and the AG asserting that they want to keep that law, did everything that they could do.
Well, how could Montana have it wrong for 100 years?
No, they had it right, but they're really not sure. There's some people that are not sure that their own state officials made the best arguments.
So, Michael, what's this mean for health care coming up on Thursday?
Who knows? I mean, anything could happen as far as that's. There's a lot of speculation now. The Chief Justice Roberts today, when he was announcing these decisions, said we will have the rest of the decisions that are ready, which may be an implication that they are going to punt and delay this health care decision till after the election.
Wow. That would be a big move.
It would be a huge move, and it would be very, very unusual. And by the way, it would leave the country in the lurch because there are a lot of provisions of Obamacare that are supposed to come into play before they would actually render their decision. And
actually, it'd be good because the health care is working.
Most of it doesn't go into effect until 2014. We're talking way down the pike, but I do think that playing with this decision is a political football, a politicizing of the court. They need to get the decision out Thursday, and let's move on.
I agree with you, Catherine. There's no doubt that would be better for the country. It would be better for the court. And let's hope that they come up with it.
How about the consumers? How about Americans? I mean, if they strike down the mandate, Joan, this could screw up the whole law, and it would hurt a lot of Americans.
Well, yeah, if they strike down the mandate, people have lots of different opinions about the way the administration is going to come back at that, Ed. But there's no doubt that we're prepared for Scalia personally to reverse himself on some precedents that he's found before, because he really seems determined to do whatever he wants. Based on whether it's a right-wing,
Michael, if I can just jump in, Ed, one of the things that's notable about this Arizona case is that Justice Kennedy, who was appointed by President Reagan, and Chief Justice Roberts, who was appointed by President George W. Bush, both voted with what you would call the liberal side in Arizona in striking down 3 aspects of the Arizona law. And by the way, they didn't strike down most of it. Most of it wasn't even stopped there. Most of it was already in play and already there. Yeah. It's a very big, long law. There were only 4 sections that were controversial. 3 of them were struck down.
One final point I want to make to you, especially, Michael, is that if the Supreme Court strikes down the law, then the Republicans will have to come up with their plan on the campaign trail, something that they really haven't done.
I think it's a big challenge.
And single payer is going to be right there. There are an awful lot of people lined up to go. Is this going to give us the chance to assert an argument that was absolutely ignored and buried?
Well, would the
by
Democrats
Obama
have the guts to push for it? That's the question.
Medicare for all. We go back to Medicare for all, and that's what the debate we have.
But the Democrats would have to have the
have
guts to push for universal health care. It wasn't even at the table the last time. Could they at least give us a preview? If we have to go down this road again, we can at least include them in the discussion.
Ed, I hope that they do, and I hope that the American people have a chance to vote on it, because I, as a conservative, I know how they're going to vote.
Well,
the American people don't want single payer.
All right.
One final quick note. The first federal mandate I could find was back in about 1789 when the government mandated all able-bodied men to have an entire list from flintlocks to powder casings to all sorts of things in case they got called. It was a federal mandate to spend your own money.
Joan Walsh, Michael Medved, Catherine Cryer, thanks so much. Coming up, more proof that the Republican-led Fast and Furious investigation is nothing but a plot to make President Obama look bad. We'll bring you the details. Stay with us.